This is an Isuzu D-Max, and it doesn't look any different to how it did before, but there is one fairly significant change lurking underneath the metal of one of Australia's favourite utes. You've read the title, you already know it's the 2.2 litre engine that's coming in to replace the 1.9. But what you might want to know is why. Is it better than the 1.9? Is the 3 litre engine sticking around? How often should you call your mum? I will answer probably most of the questions that you might have before the end of this video. Now, because there's a new engine, that means some of the pricing and a few of the variants for the range have changed with the D-Max, but the rest of it should look pretty familiar. Give me a second and I'll run you through the headline stuff. I'll keep it to the 2.2 litre variants for now to keep it simple, though prices of 3 litre models are also up across the range. Most of the lower level D-Max variants are $1,500 more than the equivalent before, and with no manual, now the cheapest is the 4x2 single cab chassis SX with a 2.2 litre engine at $36,200 before on-road costs. You can get the SX in crew cab with a chassis or U-back in either 4x2 or 4x4 with a 2.2 litre engine. Plus, the LSM X-Rider 4x4 can be had with the 2.2 also. That one will set you back $59,500, which is still far from the most expensive D-Max around. That's still the Blade, with a 3 litre engine and comes in 4x4 only, but it's now $80,900 before on-roads. Back to the 2.2 litre variants, and while the SX grade makes do with basic cloth trim, halogen lights and standard styling, the X-Rider adds automatic bi-LED headlights with LED daytime running lights, black styling trim, nicer cloth trim inside, plus gloss black 17-inch alloy wheels. There's a detailed list of features with more information at the full review at carsguide.com.au. Like I said, the design of the D-Max hasn't changed at all. Everything on the outside is still the same, it's just the engine and some of the stuff underneath there that's all different. But what that means is that now you still have this car that strikes a nice balance between work and play. It looks ready to take the family out on the weekend, or it wouldn't look out of place on a rugged building site. But like I said, I will come back to what is actually different about the car. Much like the exterior, the interior, everything will feel pretty similar, especially while the vehicle's not actually moving. You've still got this pretty rudimentary interior, a relatively small screen that can do Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, both wired and wireless. You've got cup holders down here, nice little storage bin here. There's a hidden little compartment above the main glove box over there. Little spot to put a water bottle in. This one's Matt's. And then you've got actual physical dials and a little digital driver display in the center of those as well. Buttons on the steering wheel, nice and clear, easy to use. And then you've got sort of your four-wheel drive, diff lock, 2 high, 4 low, all of that sort of stuff. Things you'll probably be pretty used to if you've driven a 4-wheel drive or a ute at all. Also, physical controls for the climate, which I think is a welcome thing, even though it feels a little bit old school in here. It's nicer than having to do everything through a screen. In that same vein, you've also got actual volume and tuning dials as well, another thing that just saves you having to take your eyes off the road. In terms of the actual space to sit as a person, rather than as places to put things, the seat is pretty well adjustable. It's a nice little bit of bolstering just to sort of keep you in place, stops you from moving around too much, especially if you are actually going off-road and sort of being jostled a bit by the car. But the steering wheel's nice to hold, visibility is pretty good, and the seat itself, even though it's this sort of kind of scratchy cloth, is pretty comfortable. All right, you've been very patient, so let's get into what's actually new about the Isuzu D-Max. And it's this 2.2 litre engine is here to take the mantle from the 1.9 litre engine as the little sibling to the 3 litre engine. Easy to keep track of. But it's more than just a slightly bigger engine. With more power comes more efficiency, apparently, or whatever the line from Spider-Man is. An extra 10 kilowatts and 50 newton meters mean that totals are now 120 kilowatts and 400 newton meters. On top of those new figures, Isuzu also says there's 60% more torque around idle at 1000 RPM, which is pretty good for putting your foot down from a takeoff. Also, another key update for the D-Max is the gearbox that's attached to this engine now being an 8-speed automatic rather than the old 6-speed. I'll get into it once we're on the road, but I'll tell you what, those two things work pretty well together to change the characteristics of the D-Max for the better. The 3 litre D-Max remains as it was, 140 kilowatts and 450 newton meters, plus a 6-speed auto. And as ever with either drivetrain, that's all sent to a part-time 4-wheel drive system. Oh, and if you're a fan of manual gearboxes, I've got kind of bad news for you. Isuzu's getting rid of them. There aren't any anymore because apparently no one was really buying them, which has just happened a lot. That just keeps happening. No one's buying manual gearboxes. So automatic only, but it's a good thing, tell you what. As well as there being more power, torque, and a new gearbox for the 2.2, there's also more efficiency, or less fuel consumption. 6.9 litres in the old engine now becomes 6.6 litres in this engine for every 100 Ks that you drive. That's also helped by a new stop-start system that is now also on the 3-litre engine in this and in the MUX as well. All right, of course, now that we're behind the wheel, we're on the move. Some of the stuff that's different about the D-Max with the 2.2 is going to be most obvious, and I'll start with the most important stuff. And that's that this 2.2 litre engine and that new 8-speed transmission that it's hooked up to are really smooth. It's actually a lot more refined and quiet than even the 3 litre that's still around, but also that 1.9 that was pretty noisy and a little bit rattly. It really had that sort of diesel characteristic to it. And the 2.2 still does, but it's a lot quieter and it's a lot smoother. It works really well with that 8-speed to sort of avoid revving itself out and becoming too, clattery and noisy. But at the same time, it still, has enough power and torque to get itself out of the way. There are a bunch of MUXs here at this launch as well, and I'll tell you what, the characteristics of this new drivetrain suit that big family SUV to a T. As you can see, I'm not on the road at the moment. I'm actually still at the 4x4 park where we spent a fair bit of this launch driving around in D-Maxes and MUXs as well, testing it off-road, seeing how capable it was. Of course, none of that stuff's really changed, but the 2.2 litre engine and its low-down torque has helped a lot with things like climbing steep inclines and, just making sure that there's enough power to get over obstacles. Basically what I'm saying is that the new power and efficiency figures that come with this 2.2 litre engine are kind of second to how much the characteristics of the car has changed. It's made the D-Max a much more likeable ute, even without that big 3-litre engine. So the new drivetrain gets a big tick of approval from me, and the rest of the D-Max's characteristics are still, pretty familiar. It's quite good for a dual cab ute, and by that I mean its suspension is still a little bit busy, but it's not exactly going to shake you around too much. Still pretty easy to control, it's nice and predictable, and it feels comfortable enough on the road. Its steering is really light and has sort of a little bit of a spongy spot in the middle of it, a little bit doughy, but predictable, still pretty easy to work with. The brake, again, that sort of initial sort of soft, spongy feel that doesn't do a lot until you sort of get to that sort of biting point where the brakes start to work, but once they do, pretty gradual, it's not unpredictable, and again, easy to work with. The whole sort of characteristic of the D-Max is that it's not quite as refined as, maybe some of its rivals, especially the Ford Ranger, which sort of has the most car-like driving experience in my opinion, but it's a lot less rugged and sort of rough than other rivals like, maybe the other most popular ute in the country, the Toyota HiLux. Sort of strikes a nice balance between the two, and I think for quite a lot of people, it's probably the best option when it comes to utes. One of the other key changes for the D-Max is, of course, that new stop-start system, and it's not the smoothest I've ever experienced, but it doesn't really affect the way you actually drive. It just is pretty noticeable. It does a decent job of turning itself off when you put your foot on the brake, and it starts the engine back up as soon as you lift your foot off the brake. So there's not really a delay in response if you need to take off at the lights, but it's a diesel engine. Itself, turning on and off is not exactly the smoothest of things. So all in all, the D-Max is a pretty easy ute to drive and in turn live with. But there is one thing that kind of bothers me about the way this ute behaves, and it's something that's pretty easy to turn off or just not turn on in the first place. It's the way its lane keep works while you've got adaptive cruise control on. The rest of the adaptive cruise control system works pretty well, but its lane keep just likes to hang out on painted lines a little bit too close for comfort. So for example, earlier today, I was finding myself coming around a bend to the right, and the D-Max wanted to hang on the inside of the road just a little bit too close to the opposing traffic for my comfort levels. And then later on, a turn to the left had the same thing, but then the D-Max wanted to sit on the shoulder of the road. I'm not sure whether that's just the fact that it needs the lines nice and close to make sure that it's staying within the lane, but it's not exactly a a comfortable feeling when you're doing 100 k's an hour and there's a road train coming the other way, for example.
Isuzu has done well to include pretty much the full range of safety features on all of its variants, with the SX only missing out on a rear parking sensor, though it still has a camera, obviously. Key features like rear cross traffic alert with braking and adaptive cruise control are standard, plus the D-Max copped 5 stars from ANCAP, even though that was under slightly easier testing back in 2020. Isuzu's 6-year, 150,000 kilometer warranty covers the D-Max, which could do without the limited distance, especially for a workhorse. There's also 5 years of flat rate servicing every 12 months or 15,000 Ks, costing $469 each time. That's gone up about $20 per visit since the update, with the total cost over 5 years at $2,345. There are 164 Isuzu dealers across the country, so finding somewhere to service it shouldn't be a challenge.
I'll admit, I rocked up to the launch of this new D-Max kind of expecting to be put into a car and maybe not even really be able to tell the difference between the old 1.9 and the new 2.2. But I'm pretty impressed by this new engine. It really refines the Ute and it makes it a much more appealing offer. And of course, the kicker for Isuzu is that it's easier for them to meet emissions targets if they sell more of these. So that's why they've spent, I guess, so much time making this Ute feel a lot smoother and a lot nicer to drive. But given how popular the Ute already is, I think it's a tactic that's probably going to work, because I reckon if they get people test driving these, and it's something you should do if you are looking for a new dual cab Ute, once you actually jump in and realize how much smoother this Ute is because of that new engine and gearbox, it's pretty hard to even maybe justify buying the 3-litre. And it's a tactic that might work, because with how popular this Ute is, there are going to be people coming through showrooms, and once they jump in and give the new 2.2-litre a little bit of a test drive, I have a feeling that they're probably going to realise that maybe it's even worth getting it over the bigger 3-litre. But of course, that's something only time will tell.